Hi, welcome to the Comics and Cancer Awareness Panel. I'm Amy Chu. I'm a comic book writer. I write comics for Marvel, DC, IDW, just about every every comic book publisher you can think of. But maybe something you probably didn't know is that part of my journey actually started when I was diagnosed with breast cancer 10 years ago, and I decided to kind of make a career switch. And so that's why I'm here moderating. This is not about my story, but this is about the story about all these wonderful creators here, and who have created some very important, memorable works. And I want to just maybe the best way to go about this is just to have people quickly introduce themselves and their work. And maybe we'll start with Marisa.
Hi, I'm Marisa Acocella. I used to go by Marisa Acocella Marchetto, but I got a divorce, so there's that. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2004, and when I was first diagnosed, I was on deadline for Glamour magazine, and their second response was, "Do you want to write about it?" And I did 6 pages in Glamour, which appeared the next year, and from that, I got a book deal and did Cancer Vixen. And it's really funny how the whole story came about, which was when I was first going to write about it. I was going to call it Breast Case Scenario, but a friend of mine thought that was such a terrible title. And at the time, I was really depressed when I was diagnosed, obviously, like who's happy about getting a cancer diagnosis? And I was wearing like ratty shoes and ratty sweats walking along Hudson River Park. And he said, "You look like a victim, where's the vixen?" And from that, Cancer Vixen was born. And I went back and drew the vixen on my book cover, and that's my story. So that's how I started Cancer Vixen. But before that, I have been, and I still am, a New Yorker cartoonist. And I've had other books published, but that's how I decided to do Cancer Vixen.
Fantastic. Brian, what is your story?
I'm always quick to say my book, Mom's Cancer, is about my family, about my mother. I'm not the person who had cancer, so that makes me different from some of the other folks here. But I told our family's story in the form of a comic because it seemed like the most direct way to communicate these experiences, these personal experiences. When a comic is really working right, it can feel like a direct tap from the creator's head into the reader's head without any intervention. And it was just an ideal medium for me to work in. So I wrote and drew Mom's Cancer about my mom's diagnosis and our family's reaction to her treatment and so forth. It was my first major work of graphic noveling. I'd been a cartoonist and illustrator before, but it was my first book, and I've gone on to do more, including my most recent A Fire Story. Mom's Cancer has been just incredibly gratifying for me, because the first thing it did is it got me into this whole network of people that's now called graphic medicine. This whole idea, there's a whole group of people out there, doctors, nurses, university professors, who do graphic medicine, who practice it, who integrate comics into their teaching and into their practices. It's been going on since about 2010 after the first conference in London. And I've been a part of that, and it's just been the most rewarding thing. I never expected when I started making my little comic strip that it would become this sort of thing that's integrated into medical school curricula and taught in medical schools. And it's just the most amazing thing, most gratifying thing to be a part of. So that's my mom's cancer story.
AJ, what's your story?
Hi, I'm AJ. I wrote In Waves. I'm also an illustrator and cartoonist, but the story behind In Waves was my partner of 8 years had osteosarcoma, which is cancer of the bone. And she had passed away shortly before I graduated from school. And then I took a study abroad trip to London, where I met No Brow, which is a British publishing company. They saw that I did everything, and they wanted to do a book with me. And it started off as a children's book, and for whatever reason, they wanted to switch gears and do something more personal. And I had told them what happened with my partner, and the reason I got into surfing was her. And so that's pretty much how it all came together. It sort of all coalesced in a very serendipitous way. And it was my first work out of school, and I basically weave her story with the history of surfing.
Wonderful. And I also want to welcome Meredith Hall-Chand. Can you introduce yourself a little bit about your organization, which we all probably have heard of?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm really humbled to be among such great professionals here, and the work that you guys do, and just the aspects that you bring to cancer that really is necessary when people are going through their journeys. So I thank each of you and allowing me to be here. I'm the executive director of Susan G. Komen in San Diego. So I oversee the San Diego chapter here. And we service over 5,000 men and women in San Diego. Everything from paying for a biopsy, a mammogram, to when a whole family, someone's going through treatment and we help pay for rent or transportation, childcare, medication, anything really to do with their cancer journey. And so I get to be on the service side of things, where I get to work with our patients day in and day out, and look for ways, every kind of way I can and my team can, to ensure that we're working towards finding cures for breast cancer. But really more than that is really the holistic approach of really being out in the community and connecting people to resources that are available to them besides the ones that we can provide. So I'm very humbled to be here with all of you. Thank you for allowing me to share other people's stories that are really important, and I thank you for each of your stories.
I want to say, by the way, as a breast cancer survivor, thank you for the work that you have been doing and Susan G. Komen's been doing, because it really means a lot to all of us, and all the resources you pulled together and the research you've been doing. And I really hope that we do find a cure for not just breast cancer, but all cancers, because like Dr. Larry Norton at Memorial Sloan Kettering?
Oh, he's my doctor.
He's your doctor?
Yes.
Isn't he the best?
He is the best. Are you also? He's the best. Now we can talk.
All right, he's a really good friend of mine. I'm on the board of the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. But Larry said, if you cure the DNA of cancer, you cure one, you cure them all. So that's good for all of us to know. I mean, everybody on the planet globally. So, but anyway,
that's definitely what folks are talking about, the new wave and the new, areas that they want to get into, and
for sure.
Those bio companies are really looking into that and really exploring it. So, yeah, absolutely.
I want to also, because we were talking about graphic medicine and how important it is and how healing it is, to sort of just talk about two different things. One is, when I was asked to write about my breast cancer experience for Glamour, I didn't realize it then, but I realize it now, that it's called subjective journaling. And whenever I talked about my, cancer, I never put those two words together because I didn't want to own it. And I wanted to get the cancer off me and on the page. So for those reasons, I never wanted to own, I didn't want the cancer to become part of me. That was number one. And number two, also not to forget, the whole graphics medicine was pioneered basically, or one of the earliest writers about cancer was Harvey Pekar, who wrote Our Cancer Year, which was an amazing piece of work. And sadly, he's passed away, but I was on a panel with him, and he was one of the most generous and genteel and compassionate people I've ever met. So anyway, just wanted to remember Harvey.
Well, so for you, it was a form of therapy, it sounds like. Is that true?
Absolutely. And I also think when you're, writing about some kind of trauma, whether it's cancer or COVID, it's always good to put it down on paper. It just feels so much better. And it's like a great way of therapy. It's a great therapeutic. I mean, far better than vaccines. Well, who knows? But I mean, I definitely think it's, a great way to heal.
AJ's nodding vigorously there. AJ, do you want to talk about that as well?
I mean, having promoted this book for the past year, one of the, most common questions was was it cathartic? Did you feel like you were having some sort of release? And I totally agree with Marisa, because at least for me at the time, it was all very fresh. Like that was one of the reasons I was sort of hesitant to do the book, was it was so soon after she passed away that like I didn't know whether I had even processed it properly, or if there even is a way, or if I had enough distance to write about it objectively or whatever. But as I was doing it, it was like, it was very, I felt very at peace, you know. I was spending time with her, and I was sort of, you know, it's comics are very isolated, uh, depending on how you're doing them, but they can be very isolating, and it's a good way to spend time with someone's memory, you know.
You know what? What a beautiful way to remember somebody, write about them the way you did. So, I mean, that's really a beautiful achievement.
I agree and disagree to some respect. In some respects, it is therapeutic, I think. And when I told my wife I was doing mom's cancer, she said, "Well, at least it'll be good therapy for you." And she's right to an extent, in that in order to write about something, you've got to understand it, you've got to process it, you've got to examine your own feelings and say, "Why did I react to that in that way in that situation?" And sometimes it's not all clear because your head's all fuzzy and muddled, and you've got to think these things through. And you know, I always felt like I had another pair of eyeballs over my shoulder watching me go through these experiences. You know, this objective observer writing things down while I was in the midst of this subjective experience. But, you know, I've had conversations with some of my graphic medicine friends and colleagues about this whole idea of catharsis. And I would disagree with AJ a little bit, in that I don't know if it's cathartic to write about these things. I think it's therapeutic, but catharsis to me sort of implies a working through it, getting it out of your system. And I don't know if that's true, because just the fact, you know, it takes a year and a half or 2.5 or 3.5 years to write and draw a graphic novel. Just do it, put it on paper, and you're immersed in it. Then, you know, you're living it every day fresh. And I mean, you know, my book came out in 2006, so it's been 15 years later. I'm still talking about it. I'm still, you know, I'm reliving it today with you, refresh. And so I think there's sort of there's an aspect of it that wallow's the wrong word. Wallow's too strong a negative a word, but you kind of have to keep living in that space when you do a book like this. And I don't know if that's healthy entirely.
Well, I actually feel that I'm grateful to still be living and talking about cancer, because, you know what, this is like, I survived not one but 3 of them. So, you know, I'm just really grateful to be here and still talking about or talking about anything at this point. So, by the way, Brian, our books came out the same year.
I know.
I remember when yours came out. I can't believe this is the first time I'm actually talking to you. I can't believe our paths have never crossed before.
Has anyone ever met each other before?
We actually, Marisa and I, we met for like 5 minutes at the Miami Book Fair in 2009 or something. But your book came out, and also Cancer Made Me a Shallower Person by Miriam Engelberg came out at the same time.
When she passed away.
And I got to know Miriam a little bit. I love her book because we both live in the San Francisco Bay Area. We cross paths a lot. And Miriam Engelberg was just a wonderful person who treated cancer in a very direct and probably the funniest way I've ever seen or read. I love her book. So anyway.
What I find really interesting about your conversation happening is it's sort of what I hear from our patients is everybody looks and deals with their own journey in a different way. And when you're talking about, you know, survivorship and the families that are either going through cancer treatment with their loved ones, or they lose their loved ones, every single person's journey and the way that they talk about, you know, specifically breast cancer, and the way that I hear stories shared is just across the board entirely different with how people are able to deal with the tragedy and the trauma that you mentioned, Marisa, of a diagnosis. And it's not just the trauma that the individual who's going through cancer is going through, but the people who are surrounding that loved one. And that's often what I, you know, see and feel and hear from patients is exactly what, you know, the 3 of you are sort of describing and, you know, sharing. So
I just want to clarify one thing. Brian, are you sure we actually met? Because I remember seeing you walk out of a panel and not like saying hi. So
I think we had 5 minutes or so. You did a panel right before mine is what I remember. And so we just kind of had a hi, nice to see you, but
we
maybe
never
not.
You know,
so-
ships.
Yeah,
but it's nice to talk to you now.
it is. It's really nice. And the other thing, kind of building on what Meredith just said, is one function Mom's Cancer has served for me that I didn't really expect is memorial.
Mhm.
And AJ touched on this a little bit too. My mom actually passed away in 2005, and I don't go back and read my book very often, but when I do, it's a diary of those times, and I'm reminded, oh yeah, that happened, and I wouldn't have these memories if I hadn't written them and drawn them down. I'm sure, you know, AJ was talking earlier about sort of living with and mourning, you know, his partner, and through this process, and I feel that way about my mom too. Is this was a it's a window, it's a snapshot into a time in my family's life that otherwise might have slipped away from me.
But one thing is, these are all very personal stories, but also very different stories. And I think I almost feel like it should be required reading for not just people who are going through cancer, but also the people around us, because it is very scary business, right? It's you know, not. I have the, and again, this is very personal and very different. Is that I did the reverse thing. I used to write about cancer before I got cancer. So when I actually got it, I used to work in biotech before I got into comics, and so when I got it, I was like, I know exactly what I have. This is so weird. I feel like almost like an imposter because I know the nature of my tumor, and you know, it's very weird going through that process. But maybe Meredith can also talk a little bit about the impact of literature, these narratives that can help with people who are trying to sort of get their heads around what's going on.
Yeah, I think definitely, especially the last 7 months, have really taught us about isolation. And I think somebody brought up the word isolation earlier. And, you know, everybody, like I said, deals with cancer, a cancer diagnosis in a different way. Some people really want to talk to others about it. Other people don't want to talk to their family about it. They don't want to talk to their friends about it. Sometimes that can be cultural, we've found. And sometimes it can just be, you know, individual basis. Many people, we've come a long way with being able to talk about cancer, but years and years and years ago, it was taboo. It was not something that people wanted to talk about.
I agree with that 100%. Like I said earlier, when Jacqueline Suzanne wrote Valley of the Dolls, and she had a character in there, which was the Sharon Tate character in the movie, who had breast cancer, she committed suicide. I mean, those days were long gone, but I was friends with Evelyn Lauder, and nobody talked about breast cancer. And that's the reason why she created the pink ribbon, to increase breast cancer awareness. And when she created it, she didn't copyright it. It was like her gift to the world. And the pink represents healthy tissue. So, I mean, I definitely think we've come a long way. I remember when I was on book tour in Italy, even, they wouldn't even use the word cancer. They said tumor. And that was 2009. So I think it's, you know, it seems now to be more of a personal choice whether you want to talk about it or not. But I mean, back then it was definitely taboo.
Yeah.
So.
I do think it's also cultural. That Marisa, I thought your book was hilarious. I love the tone. What was your thinking around that? I see that you basically were taking that cultural bulls by the horn and said, like, screw that.
Well, I hated the idea of like being a victim, you know, the whole thing about like, you know, oh, I have cancer, I feel like a victim, you know, I just hated that so much. I hate being a victim in any kind of situation. So when my friend said, you know, Vixen, I was like, that is something I'm going to definitely embrace and make that my battle cry. And, you know, my mother was a shoe designer, and she designed shoes for Jackie Kennedy when she was First Lady. Jackie wore her shoes at JFK's inauguration. So I've always had like this relationship with shoes. And I wore a different pair of shoes to every single chemo session, and it made me feel powerful. So that's really where that came from. And, you know, it's like, I see that other people have taken up the mantra of cancer vixen. I see it all the time now. And the whole thing about kicking cancer's ass, or kicking cancer's butt. I mean, I put that on my book in 2006. And I feel like that
Your book really spoke to me. The level of detail you would put the MAC lipsticks with the shades, and when I was doing chemo, I would go and buy makeup after my chemo.
Oh, really?
I go to Barney's and I buy makeup, and even though I felt like crap, so it was interesting because I was reading Brian's work too, and you had a level of clinical detail, but it didn't include the MAC lipstick shades, right? So I was reading that, and and again, this is not about me, but I'm sharing with Marisa because I think she would appreciate this, because I was doing the chemo, and it was always a goal of mine to be in the New York Times style section, right? Just like stupidly, whatever. And the only Bill Cunningham was standing outside Barney's when I just finished chemo, and I was all aglow with my makeup. And he's like, "Can I take your picture?" I'm like, "You don't even know I just went through chemo. This is amazing."
That's fantastic. Well, that's because you were feeling good about yourself.
I was feeling good. I was rocking my Kermit hat. I was wearing a Kermit the Frog hat, and I think he thought that was really funny. But anyway, you got to find humor where you can find it, right?
And I think, whatever you can do to feel good about yourself is a great thing. I mean, I have a friend who wrote the book, Why I Wore Lipstick to My Mastectomy. Same thing with her, Geraldine Lucas.
I still have a lot of lipstick. Now, AJ's book is so beautiful. No Brow only does beautiful books, really, right? I mean, those books are just gorgeous. Forgive me if I'm going to be more of a process geek here, Can you talk a little bit, and all of you actually, and, because for me, I live in a world of superhero comics where the pacing and the formula is pretty set. I do 20 pages, put it together into a 120-page book. All of you took very different approach. I'm very curious to hear how you decide on length, how you decide on the process, what to include, what not to include. I know that's a lot there.
Well, thanks for the kind words. It was basically dictated by page count, and that's those parameters is where I started, and then juggling two different stories, like a personal narrative with a historical one. I needed to find a way for it to make sense, because it wasn't my idea, it was a suggestion by my publisher. So then I had to find these different threads to connect the stories, and the more I did my research, the more things revealed themselves. And it was a long, arduous process of reading and writing. Basically, the drawing sort of came naturally.
Hey, Jennifer.
Hi there. I just got the email that this was happening right now. Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah. Well, it was, we're so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
You're coming in at a great moment. We all sort of introduced ourselves, and we're just talking. We're kind of getting a little bit process geeky here, but maybe you can talk about who you are, your amazing book.
Oh, thank you. My laptop at the right level for you guys. And the light is weird. Here we go. So I'm Jennifer Hayden, and you just want me to quickly describe my book?
Yeah, just talk about, for those who don't know, and your title, and
Okay, so my book is called The Story of My Tits, and it was published by Top Shelf in 2015, and it was nominated for an Eisner, and it's long. It's about 352 pages long. It took about 10 years from conception to completion, and it tells the story of my breast cancer, but it does it the long way by telling the story of my entire life, really as it relates to my breasts and self-image and being a woman, and all of this, all the things that I felt a reader should understand as the background of going through a bilateral mastectomy and having your life, altered. And also obviously the effects on my immediate family, and then, the other stories that were for me germane to my breast cancer story, which were my mother's breast cancer story, and also my mother-in-law's cancer story. She had lung cancer, and these cancers affected their marriages, their major relationships, and I was watching them, before I went through my experience, and always and I was wondering the whole time, how will this affect my marriage and all that? So it's it's much more really than my personal story, but it's told, you know, from my point of view and very personally. Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about your process because, you know, 10 years and 300 something plus pages. How did you intend to go that far, that long? What was the thinking?
Oh, well, first of all, I'm pretty obsessively thorough, like a lot of comics artists. So I was going to make this was going to be soup to nuts, because I also wanted to be the most helpful that I could towards other women going through it. And I really looked on this as a way not just to exorcise my own experience of cancer, but to make other women who are about to go through this not feel so alone. And as I started doing it, it was my first work in comics ever. So also there was a loss of control here. I mean, I didn't realize how deeply you could get into this via comics. And it was an explosion of discovery about how many of my emotions and experiences I could depict. But I also definitely wanted this to have a novelistic quality, and that involved having other characters in it and exploring the parallels between their experiences and mine. And I wanted that richness to it because I didn't want it just to be me, 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 me. Also, though, I wanted to have the reader have the experience I had when I was diagnosed and feel all the ripples of my experience, past experience that had to do with the breast cancer diagnosis. So instead of me starting at the moment of diagnosis and presenting flashbacks to what meaning it had to me, my idea was to give the reader everything that would later make them go, oh my God, this is how she must be feeling. I'm feeling it too. So showing rather than telling, I suppose. Yeah.
And one thing I really wonder, and this, I don't mean to pander, but you know, this body of literature, you know, your stories are so important and so affirming, and in some cases really funny, that I feel like instead of all those countless magazines that are sitting in the waiting rooms of these doctors, why are we not passing out graphic novels to everybody? I just think it'd be so much better.
Some people are.
My own book. I actually buy my own book and give it to like MSK and
yes.
So
it sure made me feel better. I could laugh at what, things that I'm going through, and instead I had to do it afterwards. But that's.
Well, Marisa, hello, Marisa.
Hi,
I just want to say, Marissa's book first appeared, a Cancer Vixen, in a magazine, and I read it, and it gave me the strength to produce my book. I read in the waiting office at my doctor's, waiting for a checkup for my breast cancer stuff. And I opened it up and I just said, this is great. And I'm going to go ahead and tell my story. I then didn't read Cancer Vixen because I didn't want to be influenced.
But Jennifer, I have to say, when I read your book, I loved it, right? I told you.
Thank you. Well, you did. You wrote me a lovely blurb for the back. I mean, it was wonderful.
So.
Well, as a writer, I loved everybody's work. I just, and I laugh that, I mean, I can doodle terrible sketches, but, the kind of discipline and the ability to tell the stories, I have to write a script and hope that somebody wants to draw it for me.
But I want to say, I love everybody's book on this panel. AJ, your work is beautiful, and Brian, I love your honesty. And so, I mean, I'm fans of everybody here, so. But Jennifer, are you still living in New Jersey?
I am in a new house, but actually not.
We need to talk because I moved, so.
Oh, where did you move to?
Jersey City.
Oh, well, that's
so are we Jersey girls too?
Yeah, where do you live?
I'm in Princeton.
Okay, so we should all talk later.
You're near Princeton. You're kidding. I didn't know that. That's where I am.
Oh,
I love it.
We're not neighbors, are we?
Oh my God.
Well, I'm in Hopewell.
Okay, you're close enough.
So when you take a look at US 1, which is one of our local newspaper magazine publications, the next one, I think I'm in it with a couple of other local cartoonists. A guy came up to take a picture, and he's doing a little thing about not about graphic novelists. I'm very depressed at how few graphic novelists are around me, and we have painters and writers and
Oh yeah, we got all sorts of stuff.
we
Yeah.
got everything creative going on here. This is like this is where the stuff is made, and then it goes to New York and gets sold. But the thing is, nobody's doing graphic novels around here.
Well, how do you know? Maybe you should just find out. Like maybe you should start a graphic novel thing over there.
I think you're it. Celebrate it. Go for it. Go with it.
Yeah,
Dominate, you know?
I've done events, but the events are not overly populated, I have to say. And although I have also done several presentations at Princeton, and Princeton University is good about teaching graphic novels. They have a wonderful guy there.
I sat in on one, and yeah.
Excuse me, my parents are at my door and they know I have this thing going on. My mother is a smother. Excuse me for a second.
Now I don't feel so bad checking in. I was like microwaving my lunch going do and got my email. Wah, hair standing up.
It happens in the pandemic. I'm always terrified that I'm going to miss. I'm sure I have missed a meeting. Honestly, who knows? You know, people are just too polite not to tell me. But you know, so I'm going to continue on my process geeking here. You know, I'm going back to Brian. Because I was like, wow, you know, again, very different, because like AJ is like, oh my God, you know, not that Brian, yours wasn't, but I appreciate, again, because I just told you, you know, I was in actual biotech, you know, with a bunch of scientists before getting into comics. So your style resonated with me because it had the level of detail that I wanted to read about, but still made it incredibly personal, you know. So can you also talk about your process, how you went about it?
Yeah, thanks for that.
Research intensive.
Well, Mom's Cancer started as a web comic because I didn't know what else to do with it. I'm putting online, it was free and immediate, and so I just started putting chapters online as I wrote and drew them. But I worked about a month to 6 weeks behind. So it was Mom's Cancer was getting posted online in real time, but minus about 6 weeks. And I did that because I wanted the opportunity to observe and take notes, and then have a little time to kind of figure out what it meant and how it fit together. I didn't want Mom's Cancer from the start to just be like a diary comic, like Wednesday we went to chemo and this happened. I wanted it to have a sort of novelistic quality, like Jennifer talked about, to have a beginning and a middle and an end, and character arcs that would take you start here and go to somewhere else. Even though when I started, I didn't know what the end of the story would be. So I needed that kind of built-in time, and I edited ruthlessly. Basically, if I took a lot of notes, I observed a lot, but if it didn't contribute directly to my mom's story, advance her story somehow, and realize it wasn't about me, even though I was a character in the book, I just cut it out. And so Mom's Cancer ended up being pretty lean. I think it's 128 pages, but most of that's because I just edited the crap out of it to just focus like a laser as much as I could on my mom's story. And I did want to include some of that detail you talked about because I needed that verisimilitude. You know, I needed to show that, yeah, I was actually there and this really happened to us. But I also understood that that would change over time. You know, the drugs they gave in 2003 are not the drugs they give now, and the therapies change and things change. What I wanted to really capture was the universality of this experience. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if the rest of you have come across this, but what I found was I just succeeded beyond my wildest dreams at that, is that I'll have people come up to me and say, you know, I read your book, and my mom didn't have cancer. It wasn't my mom, it was my dad, and he didn't have cancer, I had this, and I don't have sisters, I had brothers, and we don't live in America, but it was like you were sitting in our living room watching us. And I'm like, how does that work? None of the details are the same. There's absolutely no commonality in our story, but it's the same. And I think what's the same is the response of people in these traumatic situations, how we respond to them, how we interact with each other during them. And I think part of that is due to the tremendous power of comics that is just, there's something about this combination of words and pictures that works better than words alone or pictures alone. And just like I said before, sort of bypasses all those critical filters and just is like a direct tap from my head into yours. I was surprised by that over time.
I feel the same way because I think there's something about the words and pictures and the emotion involved when you draw something you feel so strongly. I think people really respond to that on an emotional level. And I think when you deal with something like cancer, it's even more so. And I have to say, I still like get letters about my book, and I'm really grateful for that. But I'm also grateful that we have this platform. And I think that's why I think these books are, you know, not to pat ourselves on the back, because I don't mean to do that, but I do think these books are really, really important, no matter what anybody goes through, to share the human experience and to realize that we are all connected and not alone, especially in times like this where there is so much division going on and so much disconnect and so much isolation. To be able to connect with other people, not just like who you know, but on a global level, it's really, really important. I think, I mean, I feel that way. So that's why, you know, I think what everybody has done here is really, really wonderful. So
it really resonates with me. Like both things you both just said. I mean, when I was writing this book, I felt like I was doing it in isolation, and I thought I didn't even think about an audience really. It was sort of like I cut a vein and let it onto the paper. And when it was released, I didn't think about people receiving this stuff. It was sort of just like, not word vomit, but very well manicured, edited word vomit, I guess. And yeah, what you both said, I wanted to ask you all what your experience was with, you know, writing about something so personal and so seemingly private. What have reactions been like to your work, this work specifically? Because I know you are all very prolific.
well, I wanted to just tell you one thing. When your book came out, I got like 10,000 emails about it. Just so you know.
I love your book, AJ. To answer your question, I would say what I just said earlier was the universality of the story surprised me. The other thing that has really impressed me was the parts of the book that were sort of hardest for me to do, hardest for me to reveal something about myself. Those are the parts that people respond the best to. Like there's a part of Mom's Cancer where I'm taking my mom into her chemotherapy, and there's a bunch of people standing around outside the cancer clinic, a bunch of patients, and they're smoking before they go in to get their treatment. And I am just pissed at these people. I'm enraged at these people standing around outside the cancer clinic smoking before they go in to get their treatments. And that was not me being my best self. That's not how I would want to show the world my generous, kind, caring spirit. But I was just angry, and I put that in the book, and I had so many people come up to me and just kind of say, yeah, I felt the same way. I feel exactly the same way. You nailed it. And so those moments in the book where I reveal myself the most are the ones that people that I was the most honest about, are the ones that people respond the best to.
That's absolutely true. The more you put yourself on the line and embarrass yourself and do the thing you're terrified to do, or draw the thing you're terrified to draw, it always brings you the most love back. It's amazing to me. I was terrified before I started my book because I knew I was going to put some stuff in there about my parents that was just going to be revolting. And I tried to make sure that it made me look worse than it made them look. That I always came across as the crappy little 20-year-old I was when things were going down in their marriage. But in the end, I was never, I never didn't get a response from people that was like, you know, thank you for saying that. Thank you for explaining that, because I felt the same way and I never understood it, you know? And I just want to inject that the closest thing to sitting around a kitchen table with a glass of wine, BSing with a friend, is comics. It just is. Yeah.
I love that.
It's the art form.
I have to say, I always think when something truly traumatic or horrific happens in my life, I think to myself, okay, you're going through this now, but it's going to be the best material later.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're not talking about this today, but you know, my house burned down 3 years ago. And even as I was walking up to it, even as I was walking up to the ashes of my house, I said, this is going to be a great story, you know, because we're not hooked up right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing this every time I'm working on a book. I realize, oh, first you suffer, then you write the comic, you know, because I'm right now on a story. and it doesn't even have a publisher, so I should just say I'm working on a project. You know, it might be a book, it might not be. And it was just a dreadful trip I took to France. And everything awful happened. And then finally, you know, there was some light at the end. But I started to laugh so hard halfway through this trip and realized, oh, yes. Now, it's been 2 years since I got home. I still haven't finished the thing. But I mean, that's, you know, and my mother, instead of talking to me about my problems, she would always just go, hoo, it's all grist for the mill, like very waspy, you know. She wasn't going to listen to me, but you wait.
Well, my mother would always say material, and like the whole Nora Ephron thing about life is material. It's really true. Well, that's brilliant, that Nora.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, accolades everywhere for all of your work, and it's wonderful. Does anyone want to talk? Have you gotten any negative responses to your books?
I did, actually.
You did?
Yeah. Somebody said I didn't suffer enough.
Oh, interesting.
I had like stage 1 breast cancer, and I didn't have to have a mastectomy, and they were like wishing me like
Worse?
Was this a breast cancer survivor? Somebody
wishing me worse. What?
Was this a survivor who was saying this, or who?
This was a survivor who's. I mean, I did get like a few of those.
Of like whose suffering was worse, or I don't know. Is this the
whose suffering was worse? I didn't suffer enough, and
Oh.
yeah. I mean, I did get that when it came out, and
Right, you're not allowed to write it unless you're stage 4.
Yeah, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean,
it's got to be rare. I hope.
No, that was rare. I mean, generally, it's been really, really well received, even now. So, yes, but that was. I tend to think humanity's mostly good. So,
except on Goodreads.
Yeah,
don't look there.
Yeah, Goodreads should be more like, you know, bad readers. So anyway.
I got a few emails from people, and this won't be an issue for anybody who's going to see this because we're all comics people who understand how comics work. But I got a few emails from people who hadn't read a comic since, you know, Casper the Friendly Ghost when they were 6 years old, who would write to me and say, how dare you make fun of your mom's cancer? Mm-hmm. Because they thought comics are supposed to be funny. That's it's right there in the word comic, and they thought I was making fun of it. They thought I was doing a funny story about my mom, you know, dying of cancer, and obviously that was not my intent. It was none of our intents. But that's a confusion of the medium and the message that I think we in comics have to be still. It's still a hurdle for us to overcome. People don't know comics can be about serious nonfiction things, or serious fiction things, or you know, juvenile or adult things. People don't understand the medium in that way. And because we're so immersed in it, we get that. But you have to understand that there's still this huge population of people out there who don't understand comics. And I hit that occasionally.
Well, I mean, that's true, but then it's also not true because like Mouse, I mean, that was like...
Well, people who wrote to me had never heard of Mouse.
Well, I mean...
Yeah, I'm with you.
I think that the term graphic novel, which everybody hates so much, cartoonists hate so much, is useful in that context. Yeah. I tend to talk about my work more as graphic novels so that I think I hadn't thought about that, but I bet that's part of why I do it. I really don't want them thinking that they're going to be looking at Snoopy. You know, it's just not, I gotta keep some kind of it's going to be a book, and it's going to be kind of literary, and it's going to be drawn in a funky way, and it's not always going to be funny, although you know, some days I remind myself this is comics, come on. But you know, I do think that it sets up a different expectation when we're willing to call these things graphic novels.
It really depends on the crowd, right? I mean, you know, when I'm hanging out with my, you know, more literary friends, they want to hear graphic novels. They feel like somehow comics diminishes it. I'm like, whatever makes you happy, you know?
I don't care as long as we sell our books, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so I think we're probably rapidly running out of time, and I'm sure Laura's looking at her watch right now. Maybe can you all briefly talk about you got projects coming up next? I want to be very forward-thinking about this. You know, again, what you've done is tremendous, and everyone should immediately run out and buy 1 million of your books, each of you. But what else are you working on that you want to tell people about? Anyone?
All right, I have a book coming out November 17th called The Big Shebang, and it's the herstory of the universe according to God the Mother. and it's something I've been working on for like 25 years. So I'm really excited about that.
Sounds good.
Anyone else?
I could say I'm in the middle of 2 books, unfortunately. One is for Top Shelf, and it's an anti-cookbook, a graphic anti-cookbook called Where There's Smoke, There's Dinner. And it's basically all of my problems with cooking, with recipes for kitchen disasters. And it's halfway done, and then I just got so exhausted at making food jokes that I had to let myself do this other story, which I don't know when it'll come out because I got to find somebody who wants it, but it's a graphic travel novella, I'm calling it, about my dicey relationship with France. And that's going to be, it'll probably be like 160 pages, 180 pages, and it's called Le Chat Noir. So it's about a trip to Angoulême for the International Comics Festival there, and everything horrendous that has happened in my life between me and France. It's neither of our fault. Yeah.
I remember when you took that trip. I'm really looking forward to your French book. After Mom's Cancer, I did a graphic novel called Whatever Happened in the World of Tomorrow, which is still out there. I did a book called A Fire Story, which we're putting out a new edition of in the spring that'll have 32 new pages. And that's the story about my losing my house in the Northern California firestorms of 2017. I'm working on a 4th book that might be out next fall. In fact, as soon as we're done here, this is the contract for it. I'm gonna call my lawyer and we're gonna sign this today. So I'm not gonna talk about that, but hopefully I'll have a 4th book out late next year. Oh, and Mom's Cancer is, if somebody wants to read Mom's Cancer, you can buy the book, or you can go to gocomics.com, and gocomics.com is currently running it in that, they're actually rerunning it. So gocomics.com will have that, and please take a look.
I'm currently working on a solo show. It's a gallery show in Paris, sort of related to In Waves, just artwork from In Waves. It's a comic art gallery close to Pigalle, and I'm basically just doing a bunch of ink drawings for a gallery called Gallery Barbier. And just a bunch of freelance. I've been doing a lot of stuff for the New Yorker and New York Times, a lot of illustration.
Very nice. I'm going to let Meredith close out by talking a little bit about what you Komen folks are going to be doing with October coming up.
Yeah, so October is right around the corner, and generally it's seen as a sea of pink. And I understand some of those, comments, Marisa, that you've received. And, like I mentioned earlier, everybody's breast cancer journey is different, and the way that they are able to work through their emotions, their family is able to work through their emotions. And really, Brian, what you were talking about, which is trauma, and just the humanity of experiencing trauma and working through trauma, whether it's your own or you're directly kind of tied to it by being a family member or a friend. So in October, we're going to be doing a lot of things. Number one, COVID has, for the first couple of months, it stopped a lot of screenings all throughout the United States. Those were halted. So we have seen a great uptick in the number of screenings. Diagnostics were continuing. However, screenings were, sort of put on hold at the very beginning. And so we are really, really hitting the pavement and talking to people about getting screened, especially underrepresented populations. Here in Southern California, we really, really are out in those populations talking about the need to get screened. So that's one thing. And the second thing is lots of people are in need right now. I'm sure you guys run across people every day, those who are experiencing a cancer diagnosis, who are going through treatment. Some of them have lost their jobs. I had a patient yesterday reach out to me and say, her husband has now been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and she's a survivor herself. And now she's doing 24-hour care with her husband. She's got a farm, lots of horses that she's caring for, and a full-time job. And so for her, just she's just kind of in that task mode of what can I do and how can I make sure I'm here for my family, but also here for myself, and making sure she's still taking care of her own health. But for many folks, losing income has been challenging. So we've definitely seen an increase in the number of people needing food. and just basic necessities like rent and just staying in their home so that they can continue and finish their treatment. So that's really the drivers that we're pushing. And of course, you know, we're all about advocacy, and we're all about, you know, standing up for the patient, but also about the research components of everything that we do and finding those cures. You know, so hopefully we will have a cure not only for breast cancer, but every single cancer one day.
Amen to that. There you go.
Well, it's been a real pleasure meeting all of you and sharing your experiences and just having this wonderful conversation. I hope a lot of people will view, you know, for a number of reasons. And you know, us Jersey girls should get together sometime, you know?
Yes, definitely, especially since you're so close to me. And
I know, we'll go like, you know, Small World Coffee or somewhere, you know, and, you know, COVID outside, you know, but, you know.
oh, I'd love to see you. Absolutely.
That'd be
And
fantastic.
Marisa, you too, except you'll have a longer drive.
Yeah.